As you'll point out, the Gaza Freedom March was able to point to how Egypt's role in the blockade. They kind of did it themselves, but I'll get to that in a second. And then the United States gives diplomatic support, which is very important for the atrocities to continue. Not only for the blockade, but for all the other things that is affecting Gaza and Palestine in general, military occupation, and the horrible bombings, of course. The U.S. was silent and gave direct weapons shipments during the invasion, actually. They tried to go through Greece. Greece was in the middle of an uproar, and they stopped the aid from going, and they had to find a different route. But anyways, so the Gaza Freedom March was going to address the issue of the blockade and challenge the blockade that's being imposed on Gaza. The ideas and how that was thought of was basically a couple sources. One of the main sources, though, was anybody ever heard of the Freedom Riders in the civil rights movement in the United States? So that kind of direct action was one of the main ideas that kind of developed into this Gaza Freedom March, kind of the idea of sending these Freedom Riders down to challenge an apartheid-type system, a blockade, in this example here in Gaza, to challenge that blockade and that system of oppression. And in a way, that's a good way to kind of look at it. Now, as things developed throughout the summer, things began really picking up, and that's actually when I heard about it in the summer of 2009. And I ended up deciding to do this thing, and I wanted to organize students and friends to try to go with me, and I was able to get a couple people to go with me on that. And there were about 1,400 of us from 43 different countries that went on the Gaza Freedom March, and there are a bunch of things that happened during the organizing, possible mistakes that could be learned from. Maybe after we're done talking, if people want to talk about that, we could do that. But when we arrived, well, I guess I'll start with the week leading up to the Gaza Freedom March. We had believed that we would be able to get into Gaza. The Egyptian government had gotten all our information. It seemed like they were ready to let this thing happen. But right about a couple days before, we were told that no, Egypt's going to close the border off, seal it off, and no one's allowed in or out. And that was what we were told then. But it still seemed hopeful that we were going to negotiate to get into Gaza. And right the day I left, we heard that it seemed like that there's progress being made, and we'll probably be able to get into Gaza because other delegations have gotten into Gaza. The difference with this delegation is that it was the largest one to ever try to do this, and there was bringing people from 43 different countries. There was a lot of local activism and press, trying to get in the press. We did a very good job with doing that, and at least locally, the national press was difficult to cover, of course. But when we arrived, I left on Christmas Day, and I arrived on the 26th in Cairo, and by the time we got there, we learned that no, we're not going to be able to go into Gaza. But we were ready and prepared to do direct actions on the streets throughout Cairo, demonstrations, negotiations, all this, anything. And that's basically what happened. So the first week, the first night, we tried doing a bridge memorial of child's poems, youth from Gaza that had written some things, some pictures that people drew, poems people wrote, stories, anything. They were just trying to hang it on the bridge. And then it was taken down by, I'm not sure who the people in civilian clothing were, but they were, private contractors, I'm not sure. But they were there and they tore it down. People tried putting them back up. But then we also tried to do a boat memorial that first day. And the boat was confiscated. And we were trying to hold a vigil on the Nile there, which where we were going to leave from. And there were going to be 1,400 candles that were supposed to go into the Nile River to remember what happened a year ago that day. And the the idea of doing it, beginning the delegation on the December 27th, exactly 1 year after the invasion, was done for a major reason, a symbolic act for that main reason. 1 year ago was total devastation. The world turned a blind eye to people of Gaza. This year, the world goes and tries to challenge the blockade of Gaza. That's the general thought process with having it be on that day. But anyways, the first night was pretty rough. The boat was confiscated. Their license was threatened. The boat captains were threatened. And we also tried to have a lawyer syndicate that night too, but they blocked off the street, riot police everywhere. So we ended up meeting in this Tahrir Square, which is one of the main squares in Cairo. And there's this huge, all of us tried to get together. There were even Egyptians joining, and we had different contingents meeting throughout the square. It's right across from American University in Cairo. But we decided to try to organize and try to get, because at the time we were prepared to go to Gaza, not prepared necessarily to stay back, although that was being thought of once we learned that Egypt was going to be closing its borders and stuff. But so it was really, in Cairo, had to be spontaneous, creative, and just kind of, whatever. You can't be allowed in more than groups of 5, supposedly, and they will break you up, or try to break you up. And when you meet, you'll always have informers there. They even wear their uniforms. Like, we had military officials there, just being threatening. But that was the first night, and it just pretty much stayed the same. Also, the French contingent, and there was different contingents, and one of the great things about the Gaza Freedom March was that it was very participatory, even given the circumstances. People could free associate in any contingents they wanted to. It was mostly done by consensus, at least from the contingents that I was involved in. And you then sent kind of 2 representatives from your own contingent once you were deciding on some kind of issue, some kind of act that you were going to do, or the group was going to do as a whole. You decided amongst your contingent, and then you select a couple representatives to just relay back what you have decided to the larger group, which was great. And it worked very well, I thought. But the French contingent decided to hold the direct action, and they decided to, well, they had a plan B ready, and 300 of them, at least, decided to camp out right at the French embassy, right on the sidewalk right across from the Nile. And at first they blocked the street off and had a die-in kind of right in the street, and that was one of the major intersections, runs right along the Nile there. And that's when a huge force of riot police showed up to try to stop them, get them out of the streets. But they actually did keep the street even when the riot police and military showed up. And they actually got in negotiations with the military or police or whatever the civilian clothing people were. Got in negotiations with them, and eventually they had this kind of truce thing, and they got up, moved to the sidewalk. But the riot police blockaded. This is basically what they did the whole time we were there. You were basically behind a blockade the whole time you were there, trying to demonstrate or do anything if you're in a group larger than 5. And they would do that for a lot of reasons, but with this French contingent they're even a little bit more severe because they didn't allow food, water, or bathroom breaks to get in for 2 days. That would be the case for the French contingent. And we would be there at night trying to force food in, water in, and eventually negotiations kept on going, and they finally let the women go to the bathroom, grab some water for the rest of the people, and then eventually we were able to shove in through some tents, some food, some water,